Kia ora, good evening. A 17-year-old youth has been charged with arson and unlawfully taking a motor vehicle relating to car thefts that occurred in the Woodlands area several weeks ago. Invercargill police executed 4 warrants today relating to the theft of 3 vehicles from different addresses. A 21-year-old is assisting police with inquiries who say further charges are likely. The 17-year-old has been referred to Youth Aid. Meanwhile, daytime offenders have been targeting residential addresses in Invercargill, and police are asking people to take extra care with vehicles and possessions. In the weekend, a spate of burglaries in the Chelmsford Street and Racecourse Road areas saw offenders targeting insecure garages and vehicles at night, taking property, including cash, from vehicles. Thieves discarded any unwanted property nearby. Over the past 2 months, daytime offending has increased, and police say anyone who observes suspicious behaviour should contact police immediately by dialling 111. The Labour Party does not intend to legislate for a living wage of $18.80 per hour, instead backing a $2 an hour increase to the minimum wage. Hunter Andrews has more from the opposition party's spokesperson for Labour.
We are confident there will not be job losses as a result of an increase of this level. Employers are on notice, they will be planning for it, preparing for it, and the workers who receive it will, of course, they'll be spent, it'll be injected back into the economy, so it'll have other spin-off effects.
More than half of those 20 years, though, were a Labour administration. Did Labour drop the ball while in office?
Well, Labour put the minimum wage up over 70% in its 9 years in office. It has gone up much more slowly since then. Before Labour, of course, it remained static for about 5 years. So Labour did a bit of catch-up. It worked at a pretty good pace to lift the minimum wage. That pace has fallen off. We now have to lift it up. But the reality is this: that we have major issues with poverty in this country now. 260,000 kids are living in households that are judged to be below the poverty line. 2/5 of those are in households where the parents are working. We've now got this new class of working poor. So we have to do something about wages. Lifting the minimum wage is a first step. Then we have to look at the way we set wages generally and work to lift incomes over time.
What about the living wage? What is the policy on the living wage?
Well, we support it in principle. We're not proposing to legislate for it. We'll look at it in the public sector. We'll look at the core public sector. We've pledged to make sure that those in the core public sector are on the living wage. But we want to work over time to lift wages generally and move it up to the living wage as best we can, as quickly as we can, knowing that we have a wages problem in this country.
So you don't see huge job losses up and down the country? It is a lot to ask of, say, a cafe owner to suddenly lift hourly rates. Also caregivers as well.
Yeah.
These organisations don't have a lot of money.
Yeah, so for the caregivers, most of the aged care organisations are funded by the local DHB out of the Ministry of Health. So, and we know that there will be a cost to the taxpayer in that, and we've provided for that in our health budget. So the aged care workers will be okay. For cafe workers and hospitality workers, there's such a variety, such a range of minimum wages paid in that industry now anyway. We're getting employers coming to us saying, $16.25, they can do that, and so I'm confident that there might be some who will squeal a bit, but I'm confident that that will be a level that will be totally acceptable to the vast majority of those businesses, and it will be good for those businesses and for the people who are working for them.
7 people have been prosecuted in the Invercargill District Court for fraudulently claiming benefits of almost $148,000 in the 2013 to 14 year. Nationally, 351 people were successfully prosecuted, and $88.4 million of fraud and illegitimate overpayments were uncovered, according to Associate Social Development Minister Chester Burrows, who says reforms are delivering positive results. Mr Burrows pointed to enhanced sharing of information between the Inland Revenue Department and the Ministry of Social Development to be a standout success in the new initiatives introduced. Stay with us after the break. We catch up with William Hodges Fellow Sam Mitchell and hear the artist's impressions of Invercargill. Welcome back. Petrol prices have fallen due to a strong New Zealand dollar and declining barrel prices, leaving retail fuel prices at their lowest level in 3 months. The overdue petrol decrease of 2 cents per litre comes after petrol commodity prices fell a couple more cents after the last retail price drop a fortnight ago. Despite oil prices falling to the lowest level in a year, diesel prices have barely changed, although they are down 2 cents since the last diesel price cut on July 10th. The fine spate of frosty nights and clear days has prompted some pavement repairs in the city on Tay Street. The New Zealand Transport Agency says it's expeditious to complete repairs when rain's not forecast, and they're taking advantage of sun-filled days to repair alligator cracking caused by water leaks. Monthly inspections identified areas where failures in the thin waterproofing chip seal needed attention, and work is expected to be completed in the next week. Minister for Primary Industries Nathan Guy was in the South recently and says New Zealand has achieved record primary sector exports of $38 billion in the past 12 months. He says focus on new market access, technology and innovation will continue to grow exports across value chains and lead to greater gains inside the farm gate.
We're investing a huge amount in Primary Growth Partnership, which are 18 programs where we're investing in collaboration with industry. They're right through the value chain. That's dairy, red meat, also forestry, horticulture, viticulture and honey as well. And the economic return estimated by NZIER is $6.4 billion by 2025 and actually could be up to $11 billion. So we're investing with industry on looking at new innovation, new technological advances that can improve performance and return inside the farm gate.
And what particularly are you talking with? So the dairy sector, what would you like to see? What sort of product range in say 15 years?
Well, let's put a little bit of reality into what our opponents are talking about, because the dairy industry has grown a huge amount and we've just had a record primary sector export in terms of $38 billion after the last 12 months, which is fantastic. Dairy up around $17 billion. Red meat and wool, $8 billion. That's a record for them. That's very important to the Southland economy. They're forecast to grow at 22% over the next 3 or 4 years. Forestry and logs, they've had a boom year as well, $5 billion. Horticulture about 3.6. Fisheries, also important to Southland, 1.45 billion. So while our opponents may say the government's not doing enough, well, we're doing a huge amount in terms of opening up new market access. We're looking very seriously at the Trans-Pacific Partnership. Now, some of the political parties with their rhetoric, they're saying that they can't support the Trans-Pacific Partnership, and we know that that's worth between $2 and $4 billion in terms of export returns. As a result of growing our exports, and our exporters and our farmers do a fantastic job of producing a quality product that ends up in 200 countries all the way around the world. As a result of the great work that our farmers and exporters do, that has enabled Bill English to read Budget 2014, which says we're going to get back into surplus. That means that we can fund core infrastructure items like building roads, schools, hospitals and rolling out ultra-fast broadband.
Artist Sam Mitchell has had several stints as artist in residence overseas and is now in Invercargill as the current William Hodges Fellow. The artist is renowned for her trademark Perspex works, but after sifting through relics at South Museum, she was inspired by the Delft blue ceramics that were a common choice of dinnerware among pioneers.
The Delft blue was the Chinese pattern of the time, so we're talking early 1900s. And I really thought that represented the conservativeness of this place. It really portrayed to me that people were holding on to fundamental values of their tradition and reinvesting it into something new down here, but still holding on to the old. So I've mixed it with a whole bunch of like saucy, Miss Southland bearing her breasts and young farmers of the year muscle men to give an idea of a contemporary take on something that's quite traditional and something that's quite stoic and rigid, and trying to loosen it up but still maintaining that historic kind of Delphi kind of pattern.
It's that stoic history that led Mitchell to interview some of the city's older residents and explore stories of our closeted past.
So I found some interesting things out, like on D Street you've got the Black Swan on top of the building. A local architect told me that it closed down in the 80s, so it was quite recent. It was a bordello. The Black Swan, anyone coming in from into town for the first time, would look for the Swan, and that's where you go for ladies and drink and stuff like that. So, interesting little history you've got going down here.
The Aucklander, who likes her beer, also has her own perspective on our licensing trust.
I find that control of what I can drink and where I can drink it a little bit limiting. And there is a piece here directed towards the ILT, but it's I find coming from a bigger city that to have a control over something so freeing as alcohol is a very interesting concept.
She also says the exclusion of women until recently from a local club did come as a surprise.
I was lucky enough to become a member of the Invercargill Club, and the first woman to actually be allowed. The club was started in 1873 and moved to its current residency in 1891, but they've had no women there until 1997. So the first woman to come into the club was actually a nurse, but no one knows her name. So it's very interesting for someone who comes from Auckland to have these still closeted. The women's toilet is still called the strangers' room, and that's where the women used to wait for their husbands. They weren't actually allowed into the club room at all. They'd have to wait until the steward went and got them and told the husbands that they were there. So very Southland, very conservative, very men, women separated. And the club still has that feel about it too.
And that's it from the news team this Tuesday. Stay tuned for the weather next, followed by sport from us. Good night.